Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to the last episode of Raising Believers. I'm your host, Sister Nusaybah, and again I'm joined by Shaykha Fatima Barkatulla and UmmTalha. And in today's episode, we really want to just conclude all of the points that we've been making and make sure that we leave on a positive note and show that, never to lose hope, which takes me to our last and final point. How important is hope, and why is it important that we don't lose hope when raising our children?
SubhanAllah. I sometimes say to mums, you got to imagine that your child has a t-shirt on that says, still under construction, because sometimes I think parents can get a bit over dramatic, if a child makes a mistake, or if there's a bad report come home from school, or your child, even if your child's been expelled or suspended, whatever it is, we can very easily sort of write a child off or think, where did I go wrong? Is there any hope? And the truth is that if we reflect on our own lives and how we were, we went through a journey, right? We were not perfect throughout our whole lives. There were times we made big mistakes, but then we learned from those mistakes, and actually the things that we went through made us who we are today. In the same way, our children are going to go through different things. And it's so important that the one person who never loses hope is you as the mother, you as a parent. What would you say about that, UmmTalha?
I would say that, with our children, you've got to look at them as a person who is going to be making certain choices in life, but as long as you give them the best options available to them, allow them to make certain choices so that they can also learn. And you have to remember that you make an effort. As for the outcome, it's down to Allah Azza wa Jal, and you have to always look at the bigger picture. And as a parent, you have to not lose yourself in the whole process. Because when we look at the ayah that we often refer to when we discuss family, when we discuss children, is the ayah in Surah Tahrim, where Allah says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu qu anfusakum wa ahlikum nara. Notice here Allah mentions save yourselves first and then your family. So that notion of taking care of yourself, your needs, your interests, your righteousness first, and then your children. So I think everything is in perspective you have to look at, and you have to realize that when you raise your child with Iman, even if they lose their path for a moment, for a temporary period, they will eventually come back to what they know to be right and true to their beliefs. And that's something that is quite hopeful, that inshallah, in the process, because of pressures of friends or because of influence of the society, they may lose their way, but know and be hopeful that inshallah, whatever you raise them upon, they will eventually come back to that.
But also you might have to stay with them, on that journey.
Persevere.
So even if they might not naturally come back, of their own accord.
But you don't give up on your children.
But you don't give
Never.
up, and you don't stop engaging. Do you know what I mean? The door should always be open. Door to mum and dad's house is always open.
It's unconditional compassion, because you are their parents and you are the ones who are going to be there for them in their good times and in their bad times. So as long as that connection is there, that safety net is there, then they will come back. And you want to be that person who catches them when they are about to fall. Just like you would when, as a mother, seeing your little toddler, when they're about to fall, you go and save them. Similarly, later in their life, they're going to make a mistake. And some mistakes, they have to make themselves to
Sometimes
learn.
you have to let your toddler fall.
That's it. So they will learn next time.
You see how powerful that ayah is that you mentioned. قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ نَارًا. It's like a parent does not want their child to go near a fire. And we should have that same gut instinct for the fire of the akhirah. When we see our child, whatever situation they're in, we want to intervene. We want to stand in the way. We want to push them out of the way, right? So that's just a natural instinct that we have. So although we're saying that, look, we don't have control over the results, the image that's being painted in that ayah is do everything you can. do everything you can. Another beautiful hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is, كلكم راع وكلكم مسؤول عن رعيته. That all of you are shepherds, and each of you is responsible for his flock. And the Prophet ﷺ starts with the men, right? That they are the shepherd over their home, and they are responsible for their flock. And then the woman is also a shepherdess over her children and her husband's property, her home and family. And she's responsible, mas'ul, meaning Allah's going to ask us.
Accountable.
And I think that's the thing, like, we might not be able to control the results, but be sure that there's going to be a day when Allah's going to ask us, what did you do? Did you do your best? And I think that probably brings us on to the topic of, perfectionism and...
Yeah, I think it's important to realize that, like you said, it's about the effort that we put in, and that we're human. As mothers, we're humans. As fathers, we're humans, and we're not perfect. We will make mistakes, and sometimes that's okay because we're learning at the same time. Likewise, our children will make mistakes, and inshallah, they will learn. But the important message is that don't give up, carry on, persevere, and Allah sees that effort. Allah sees, our hearts pouring out in dua, even if we don't get everything right every single time. Another point you mentioned, UmmTalha, about the ayah you mentioned about looking after yourself and saving yourself first. This really ties into the point of a lot of mothers feeling like when they do become a mother, losing themselves, losing their own identity. And I mean, we spoke about in one of the previous episodes how important it is to invest your time and give all of your attention to your children, and especially in the early years. Now I've spoken to countless mothers who feel like it's a huge sacrifice, and that when doing that they do lose their sense of identity and their self. So how does that fit in? Where do we find the balance between studying, for example, ilm, because that's a fard upon us, even as women, even as mothers, finding time for ourselves, but still being there for our children?
It's really important that we have a time for this and a time for that. Every situation that you're put into has its priority, and you have to give that priority its due. And I think it's important that you look at your needs as well as your family's needs, and as well as your extended family's needs. But most importantly, everything has to come in order of priority. Like your Lord has a right upon you, your body has a right upon you, and your family has a right upon you, and you have to give each their due right.
In that sense, we have multiple identities, don't we?
Yes.
So this idea of losing your identity, I find that problematic, and we have to have a mindset shift, I think. Embrace your identity as a mother.
And celebrate it.
And not everyone gets a chance to be a mother, right? And it goes back to that idea that we said of motherhood being devalued. Being a mother, raising human beings, raising the future human beings who are going to populate this world, who are going to change this world, is an honor. And I think we can't overstate that. We've got to embrace that as one of our identities. That's so important.
That's what a lot of women in particular are struggling with, embracing that identity, because it is honored in Islam, but not in society.
If you look at it like investment,
rather than sacrifice.
That's right. Yeah. When you look at investment, that investment is going to take a lot of time, effort and energy, because you're hoping for a greater return. And that return is not just going to be enjoyed in here. When you pass away, provided that you've done your best, you've raised a believer who is going to make dua for you, you'll be reaping the rewards in your grave. So if you look at long-term investment, then your attitude changes. You're not thinking like sacrifice. You're thinking, no, this is like an investment that's going to give me return. So the mindset is shifted.
And because the pain that's caused by, it's like instant gratification. We live in a time when everyone wants everything
fast
now. Yeah. But the things that we delay gratification for, why do we do that? It's because we know that there's going to be a pain of regret if we don't delay those things, right? If we don't act, if we don't discipline ourselves now. And we know that there's also a pain and there is the pleasure of reaping the rewards of that thing that we delayed. So in the same way, that idea of investment, I think, is beautiful. We're investing in our children, and we're going to reap the benefit of that in the future, because our children are going to be the comfort of our eyes, inshallah.
And lasting legacy as well.
It leads me on to my next question, which is, is it possible to focus on yourself, you know, perhaps build a career or study or do all of these things while having children? Is that a possibility? And I mean, you know, I look to your example, for example, you know, mashallah, a Shaykha, and you were able to do that with your children. How did you do that? And, you know, when did you do that? And how does that work? Because there will be a lot of women saying, well, you know, I want to do, you know, I don't want to just be a mother, even though we've spoken about how important it is, but, you know, there are other things that I want to do. Just before we go to the break, inshallah.
I think we don't want to say just a mother, right? We don't want to, we want to remove that kind of vocabulary from our discourse now. You know, you're a mother, yes, you might have other talents, you might have other interests, as I did, but I think, as UmmTalha said, there's a time for this and a time for that. When my children were very, very young, and even now, it's very clear to me what my priority is. Nothing is going to get in the way of this obligation that I have. You know, I have these children, I have a duty towards them. I'm not going to allow anything to get in the way of that. At the same time, if I'm clever, I can find ways of, you know, making time for different things in a balanced way. And I think that's what I try to do. And I had to look at it in the long term. I think
inshallah,
we'll
touch upon it after
that.
the break, inshallah, where we'll discuss how you actually did that. See you after the break, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back. Okay, so we were talking about how as mothers, sometimes we feel like we can lose ourselves when, you know, taking care of our children. And, you know, I know you said don't use the word sacrifice, but this is how a lot of women see it, sacrificing their own interests and their own lives when raising their children. Of course, you know, you said we have to really change our mindset and look at it as an investment. But how are some of the ways that we can still raise our children as strong, pious believers, but also, you know, take care of and nurture ourselves? I mean, we were talking earlier about this, and I think a really, really important point you made was comparison, especially as women comparing ourselves to men.
Yeah, so, you know, you were asking me how did I continue studying, and one of the things I did is stopped comparing myself to the brothers, because yes, you know, you see the way, for example, with seeking knowledge, a brother might just, whether he's married or not, whether he has many children or not, he'll just carry on studying and, you know, complete things at a very fast pace and then move on. With me, I actually had to think clever, you know. There were things like Arabic and other things that I wanted to learn that I learned alongside having children by building my schedule around that, you know. So having things like online tutors, enrolling into classes and going and studying with shuyukh on a part-time basis, you know. Sometimes I had to go into classes and negotiate studying a 4-year course over 7 or 8 years. You know, so I was looking long-term.
I think the point that really hit home with me was when you said that your timeline or our timeline is not the same as men. A man might be able to, for example, complete something in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, whereas we might have to take 10 years to do the same thing. But at least we, you know, do that little bit and realize that that bit is enough and good. I don't know if you want to add anything.
And also we're experiencing motherhood in the process, right? So never feel like, again, don't compare to men. You know, you're experiencing something unique, something very, very blessed.
I think also one needs to ask themselves a question, and that is, whatever interest that you are trying to pursue, why do you want to pursue it? That why is very important, because that helps you to clarify your intention. Are you just going along with whatever comes your way, or are you actually thinking on a very deep level, is this going to really be family friendly? Is this going to be worth my time? Is this really me, or am I just going along with the crowd? And I think that is something that every single person needs to, you know, think about, especially mothers, because you have too much to kind of, you know, juggle with. And I think you really have to put the money where the mouth is, and it's not about just doing whatever comes your way. Sometimes saying no to something is saying yes to something else. And sometimes I think you have to be very selective, because you have to be mindful that any choices that you make will have a ripple effect in your family life. And what you don't want to do is jeopardize your family life, because that's where you're coming back to at the end of the day, you know. And anything that disturbs that harmony, it's really not worth it. It's not worth it for you, it's not worth it for your children. Definitely it won't be worth it for the family life. So I think...
And also, things work in cycles, don't they? So there are times of real intensity when your kids need you, and I would say, like, those are the early years, you know, that actually you're indispensable. You're not indispensable to the world, you know, you're indispensable to your kids. And so once we internalize that and realize that, we realize, no, you know, this is the most important thing I could be doing right now. But then children grow up, you know, things change, situations change, and you realize, oh, actually now I've got a lot of time to
and your priorities will change accordingly.
And realizing the time, like you mentioned, does all go so quick.
Yes.
I think sometimes we think about now and what we want now, and we don't look at the long term, but realizing that life is short and the time your children are young is very, very short, and that inshallah, like you said, life goes in cycles and there's a time and place for everything. You don't have to do everything at one time.
It's also precious, do you know what I mean? I really want to convey to the brothers and sisters listening how precious that time is. You know, just like you wouldn't want to squander money, you don't want to squander those years, because your children have your ear, you have your child's ear in a way that you're never going to have your child's ear again. Like now that my kids are teenagers, you know, I'm not going to really have the same impact on them. But all those years when I used to tell them those stories, when I talked to them, when I got them to do this and that, when I had much more of an impact on them, I feel like are now paying dividends, right? So don't lose sight of that. Don't lose sight of the preciousness of that time.
And I think the key thing is you have to be adaptable to your circumstances. You can have your interest, like, you know, I have my interest, you know, I do different things in the community, different things in my personal time. But I'm always mindful that these commitments that I have is family friendly. So it doesn't interfere so much with my family life that it creates chaos within me, because that's not good to anyone. And I think we have to be mindful, the relationships that we have, they have certain rights upon us, and we have to fulfill these rights. So your husband and wife relationship, your parental relationship, your sibling relationship, extended family relationship. So all of these relationships, you have to be mindful when you are pursuing your different interests. And that's something that you have to be constantly reviewing, because demands change. So therefore, priorities will change. And it's a constant work in progress, if you know what I mean. And I think as women, we have a great ability to see things before it actually takes place, because we are quite emotional and intuitive human being. So I would say trust that and follow that. You know,
another thing that I think sometimes we lose sight of when we're talking about motherhood and parenthood is how fun it is. Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes we talk about it as if it's just a chore, a job, you know, putting other things aside, blah, blah, blah. Enjoy it. SubhanAllah, I miss the days when my kids were really little. I actually miss those. I know it's hard to believe if you've got very young kids at the moment. It feels like those years last forever. But actually, I look back and I think, SubhanAllah, I love those days when I would just bake cupcakes with my daughter, or I would just do this, or just, you know, go to the park, have a lovely day out with them. And life was a bit more slow and a little bit more kind of meaningful, you know. And so don't forget to savor those years and enjoy them.
You know, I remember when my son was young, I used to hear mothers, you know, talk amongst themselves, and they used to say, I can't wait till my son walks. And then they start walking. I can't wait till my son this. And I think, why is this like
Human
anticipation
beings.
that, you know, I can't wait till for future, but why don't we just celebrate and appreciate the presence?
It's true, yeah.
You know, and I think that's something that our deen teaches us a lot, you know, to just be present. So when you're drinking water, after you've drunk it, you appreciate, you say Alhamdulillah, you just kind of paid attention to the fact that you drunk, you know. And I think this is the essence of feeling that sense of fulfillment and that contentment, that you seize the moment and just enjoy the presence, you know, because the future is coming and nobody knows what's going to happen in the future. So just, you know, see what you're supposed to be doing and just be present and just leave the rest to Allah, you know. And that's where we apply the essence of tawakkul. You know, you do your bit and let the outcome be dealt by Allah Azza wa Jal. And I think that's very reassuring for believers in raising the future believers.
100%. I guess, like you said, it's about looking at what your priorities are now, and those priorities are, always changing. We have a few minutes left of the episode, inshallah, or of the entire series. Are there any final points each of you would like to make to conclude for our viewers?
I wanted to ask you, Nusaybah, like from this series, what are some of the points that have really stood out for you?
I think, subhanAllah, I've learned as a young mum myself, in that young stage, that conflicting time of, trying to maybe do everything, or, want to have time for myself and time for studies and time for this and time for that. I think, just the point that you both made right now about, savoring now and the present. We live in such a fast-paced, moving world, and realizing that tomorrow I might be dead, but I might have 10, 20 long years to come as well. Only Allah knows. But I don't want to, in 10 years' time, look back and think, I wish I had spent more time with my children. I wish, maybe they hadn't turned out a certain way at this point. So I think, for me, that really, really hit home. And especially just the importance of motherhood in general.
Embracing it as an
and
identity.
Embracing it, and enjoying it, finding that joy in motherhood. I think a lot of mothers, or especially young moms maybe, have forgotten to enjoy and do look at it as a chore. But yeah, UmmTalha, do you have any final points?
I would say, motherhood or raising believers should be seen like a journey. And when you go on a journey, you'll have your good times, your bad times, your sad times, your happy times. But remember one thing, if in that journey you stick close to Allah and His guidance, then it doesn't matter what happens, you'll be in good hands. Because you'll be, leading, in the best way, even if the outcome is not the way you desired, it's the way Allah desired for you. So you can only be the best, So I think having that is quite reassuring, because it gives you that sense that ultimately we are not in control. Allah is in control, and that gives us a bit of like a relief, because that's where we put our belief into practice and say qadar Allahu ma shafa'a.
Yeah, and I would say, look, do your best. Do your best. Our children were not born with a manual, with instructions, but the Quran and Sunnah have given us a lot of things that we can be getting on with, right? To, as I said, stack the deck in our favor when it comes to seeking to raise believers. So that might mean, as a parent, as UmmTalha said, throughout that journey of parenthood, adjusting your strategy, sometimes changing your strategy, asking other parents who are more experienced, asking your own parents, believe it or not, they know what they're talking about, they've been through it, right? Like asking elders, asking mentors, and I think, I want to reiterate, family is like a project. Sometimes we put so much effort into every other project and we treat it with such, attention. Make family your finest project.
That's all we have time for this series. Jazakallah khair so much. It's been an honor having you both and having this fruitful discussion. I hope that everybody benefits from this. May Allah accept it from all of us and from you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.